We see a lot of videos online about renting, whether it's the horrible conditions they live in, really bad landlords, or skyrocket prices.
One beds are literally just as expensive as two beds.
Fuck me in the ass, this is $5 million.
That's a lot of mold.
Despite all that, I think renting can actually be a good choice. I know people are struggling right now to get onto the property ladder, and many people actually think renting is out of necessity. But I truly think renting can be a strategic move. I would like to go through all of the steps with you when it comes to renting from start to finish, from house hunting to what it's like to live in it. And this is coming entirely from our experience. So the process of how it works is that you usually visit housing websites. The main ones are Rightmove and On the Market. That is the case in the UK across the country. It will show you all the properties in the area you've selected. It will show the prices as well as whether the place is furnished or unfurnished. In there, you will be able to contact the letting agent and then you ask to arrange a viewing. Usually with renting in the UK, you would need to probably view at least 5 to 10 properties. Once you have expressed the interests, you have to fill out a form which kind of gives the landlords the idea of your situation. The main things they'll want to know about you are your employment status, how many people are planning to rent in this property, why you have decided to move if you're renting, or why did you decide to rent as someone who's not rented before. In our experience, we actually got rejected many times. Let me tell you about the exact situation we were in. We were misjudged by the landlords. At that time, I was renting by myself in the same town and I was doing an internship at that time until I got a letter from a letting agent saying that I had to leave the house within 2 months notice. That letter is called Section 21 no fault eviction. It's a form of legislation that allow landlords to take back their property without any reasons given to the tenants. Literally, actually don't need to explain anything. The minimum notice periods to the tenants is 2 months. I was kind of told by the letting agent vaguely that the landlords just wanted to come take back the house and live in it again. I actually got really lucky to be able to talk to the landlords in person because they had to come to measure certain things around the house. They wanted to do some renovations. What triggered me a lot, the landlords actually told me that they knew about their situation of wanting to move back in 3 months earlier. But the letting agent actually told them legislation said the minimum requirement is 2 months. So there was no need for them to give notice any more than that. So the letting agent waited a bit longer until it's like exactly 2 months to send us the letter, which is really irritating because we could have had a bit more time to look around. Anyways, let's get back to the form that you had to fill out to the letting agent. In our situation, what happened was that when I wrote down the reason of why I was moving to a different property, and I did tell them that my partner is joining me to rent together. I said the reason was the landlords wanted to come back in and live in the house again. However, I didn't realize why that was a problem until I went to another town about 30 minutes away from where I was living at that time. And I talked to a landlord because he was promoting his property privately. And then he told me that the reason why I got rejected that many times was because it sounded like I did something wrong. That's why the landlords wanted the house back. I was really shocked by this because no one ever reached out asking why the landlords wanted to take back the house. No reason, because I didn't even word it like the landlords wanted to take it back. It was they wanted to come back and live in it. And because of a timeline of just 2 months to look around, we ended up settling with a house that was on the market for a while. People didn't rent that place because the landlord lived next door. And you have an enclosed driveway where you have to share that with the landlords, which not everyone would have liked. And the value you get was not very good. It was very small in comparison to what we would have been able to get in other places that were like 50 to 100 pounds cheaper. However, we were quite desperate. The time was running out. We only had a month, so we decided to go for it anyway. Now let's go through the process of what it's like to now apply to live in that house. They then send us an application and say that you have to fill this out with all the information. This allows them to do background checks as well as seeing if you are eligible to rent this place, aka they look at your affordability criteria. What usually happens in the rental market is that they take your rental prices per month, multiply that by 2.5. That's the amount you need to earn on average each month in order to rent there. But usually in your proof of employment, like a contract or a letter from your company, it will kind of show you the yearly earning. I only talked about the equation to sum it up to monthly. Now we have to get to yearly. They just need to simply multiply that by 12 just to get the yearly amount minimum earnings you need to have in order to rent this place. For us, the rent was about £625. So when you multiply it by 2.5 and then sum it up to a whole year, multiply that by 12, you get £18,750. However, at that time, minimum wage was lower. I was on like £14,000 salary at that time. I couldn't really afford to cover all the rent based on just my salary alone. So what the letting agent ended up doing was that they split up the rent into half. One goes to my partner and one goes to me, and they did an affordability check based on that alone. With mine, it was fine. I had enough to cover half of the rent, and then the other half they applied to my partner, who at that time was doing a 0 hours contract work. This unfortunately wasn't really a stable income because you don't get consistent earnings every single month. Despite us being quite independent, we ended up having to ask for my partner's dad to be our guarantor. And what a guarantor is that they will kind of be your financial backup in whatever case or whatever happens somehow causes you to not be able to pay rent. They would contact your guarantor and ask for them to pay rent on your behalf. Luckily, my partner's dad did have the job at that time and was able to provide the fixed salary to be able to support him financially on paper. It would have been much more complicated if his dad was self-employed or has 0 hours contract as well. Then that means we would have to run around and find a different guarantor that wasn't his dad. So we were in a luckier situation. Once they have checked your finance and checked your other details, did background check on you, you are free to rent. Now let's get on to part 2. Our rent was £625, but that was the amount we started with. We pay £675 because we offered the landlord to pay £50 a month extra, so we would have a pet. Let's just say it's £675 for rent. Our council tax was £150. Our water and gas bills were about £150, and this covered like heating, cooking, all the hot water. Our internet costed about £18 at that time. I think we managed to get something really good deal back then. Summing all of those up, it rounded it to £993 a month. Now we need to cover the cost of what is required in order to get onto the house market. You have to have deposits. Our situation was 2 months rent, and that ended up being about £1,250. You will get that back if you didn't cause any damage, or if there were minimum damage, you would get most of that back. And in our case, we got most of that back. Now let's move on to moving out of the house. When you're renting, there's not really a lot of things to do when you have to leave. Usually you have to wait for your tenancy contract to end. Usually a month before, the letting agent might ask you, do you want to stay? If you want to stay, you can choose between renewing the contract for the same amount of time, or you can go on a rolling contract, which we did because at that time we weren't sure what we were going to do. So after 1 year of tenancy contract, we decided to go on a rolling contract. And a rolling contract is that the contract technically will renew every single month. And in order for you to leave, you just need to give a month notice, and that's it. Or a tenancy contract, when you get to renew it, you will have to wait until the contract ends, and then towards the end of the tenancy, you can give a month notice. Process was fairly simple. Throughout that whole time, time, your landlord will put your house back on the market so they can get potential renters to view the property. During that time, you'll be asked to cooperate with the letting agent to make sure you keep the house nice and tidy for when people come and view the property. And you'll pretty much get people coming in, looking around the house with the letting agent showing them around. Afterwards, the letting agent will look around the house after you are gone to see what kind of damage you've done, if there's any at all, just so they can see if they need to deduct anything from your deposit. One thing I haven't mentioned is that when you first send the deposit over to rent a house, your deposit actually goes into a deposit protection scheme, which is a government scheme in the UK to make sure the deposit doesn't stay with either party or like a third party. It stays with the government and is protected. And when a letting agent or a landlord wants to deduct something from your deposit, they need to give a reason. I think they need to submit a reason from their side. Once it's done, they will submit it to you. You can look on the platform of the government scheme to see all the reasons why you have had some deductions and the final amount you will be paid and who it will be paid to. So for us, we ended up getting most of our deposits back, but we did run into this situation which was actually quite annoying because we had a kitten, and this kitten, or just any cat, they love doing their business on the carpet even though you have a litter for them. This happened to us many times and we had to get rid of the smell ourselves somehow, but somehow it still lingered. So we ended up hiring professional carpet cleaner to clean our out, get rid of all the smell. Despite doing that, the smell still lingered, and most people would suggest that you open the window for like a few days before you leave. However, we ended up getting a specific cat breed that cannot be let outside, and any cat owners will know that cats are great at escaping, especially our breed. So we had to keep everything shut. Because of that, the letting agent came in and could notice the smell. We got deducted for that, but what the landlord was trying to do, which I'm surprised that the letting agent even told us about this, the landlord wanted to deduct our deposit to get her a new carpet for the whole downstairs, or might even be the whole house. Luckily, our letting agent actually was being quite fair and said to the landlord that no, you cannot do that. What you could do is deduct cost in terms of cleaning the carpet, but not to replace it entirely because the carpet was very, very old. If the letting agent wanted to please the landlord, we would actually lose more than half or nearly all of our deposits. But luckily we didn't, and we only got charged like minor damages. Right, let's talk about pros and cons and start with pros for renting. Despite all the lengthy paperwork and the sudden Section 21, renting actually allows a lot of flexibility. And I'm talking about the fact that you can just leave after the tenancy contract ends. You just need to give 30 days notice, or before it ends, you give it 30 days notice, and then you can leave as soon as that 30 days end. And if you're on a rolling contract, you can decide that whenever and leave by giving 30 days notice as well and just leave. The second one is the cost. In our very specific situation, renting is actually cheaper. It was £993 to rent versus £1,639 to live in a home that we own. Yes, you could say that things have really changed a little bit in terms of the amount of years, but even when we put that amount into the Bank of England's inflation calculator, it said that we would still save 25% from just renting. With the inflation and everything going up, I would still save, just by numbers and not by the percentage, probably about £300. And if I'm smart about this, I would use that £300 difference to invest or to save for some other things. Or if I wasn't that smart about money, I would still live a more comfortable life. And the last pro of this is that you don't have to really pay anything to get onto the rental market versus when you had to buy your own house. When it comes to renting, any damages or any repairs that needs to be done are done by the landlords. You don't have to be responsible for anything unless you break it yourself or it's an unjustified or like a tenant-made damages. But most of the time, it's the landlord who has to upkeep the house. Now let's talk about the cons of renting. there is a lot of uncertainties when it comes to renting purely because the house isn't yours. At least in the UK, the landlord can take it back anytime without really giving you much of a valid reason. I think the legislation will be changed in the future, but this is again based on our experience when we received that Section 21 and had to leave within 2 months. It was something that really should be much more regulated because moving to another home is gonna take a while and it's a lot of hassle, and with the current rental market, you probably have to view at least 10 to 20 properties in order to get one. Number 2 is that you can't really do a lot. You pay them to allow you to exist in the property, and that's practically it. If you want to do any decorations, you're gonna end up complicating or giving yourself more hassle when you have to leave the house, because you need to leave the house in the best possible conditions so you can get all of your deposit money back. Number 3, the rent prices can go up. Once your tenancy agreement ends, the landlord can actually put up your rent afterwards. Or when you move to another house, it's not really guaranteed you're going to get similar prices even if it's in the same area. This happened to us in Cornwall, where when we moved out, we literally noticed the prices of everything going up significantly. This was after COVID. Big city people were buying homes in Cornwall, so there was like a massive shortage of homes for people to rent because people would make much more money to let the house be rented out by tourists. There was a massive lack of houses for local people to rent. Anyone who still has those properties and want to rent to locals put up their prices a lot. Number 4, what you pay for, you'll never own it. And this is probably the biggest argument anyone has when it comes to trying to convince someone to own a home. When you are renting, you're simply paying for someone's mortgage, which is true. But this is one argument that I like to make. I believe it really truly depends on the person's situation. For instance, in our situation, it's actually more expensive to own a house. And again, this did include the inflation. This involves more about the financial calculations and your own situation. And I truly think everyone needs to do this calculation before they even put an offer on a property. Is you need to see how much the cost of living in that house. I think there's like a recommended ratio in terms of a good financial management based on your earnings. So what you want to do is to make sure it doesn't cost you more than 50% of your total household earning. Or if you don't share the money, then it would be more like your portion of the cost to live in that house. And it should not be more than 50%. I also mean the grocery, all the fixed expenses you've got in your life to exist pretty much. This is why you can allocate the other 50% of the earnings into something else like savings, investment, disposable income, go travel, etc. to live a good life. That's the ratio I do believe, and I think this is available for you to research online as well. So do your own research on that. Do try to get that cost. It doesn't have to be down to the T, it can just be an average, like an average cost for the bills. I think this is where renting can have a bit more of an advantage, but you have to be smart with money because we definitely weren't. That difference that I mentioned before of 25%, we could have used that to invest. And that would have accumulated over time. Even though we don't own the house, we have used our money in a smart way. However, if you use that difference to just add more to your disposable income, it might not be the best idea. Yes, you have a fairly fun and good life. It isn't taking a full advantage of your situation where you don't really have much of unexpected costs.